The world was burning with conflict. The Crusader kingdoms had carved their strongholds into the heart of the Muslim lands. Jerusalem, the city of prophets, was no longer under the call of the believers, but under the iron grip of foreign knights. In Damascus, Cairo, and Baghdad, rulers argued over power while the Ummah groaned under disunity. Into this fractured world, destiny quietly prepared a man who would one day rise as the sword of justice. His name would shake the palaces of kings and echo through the corridors of time. Salahuddin Ayyubi. Indeed, Allah will support those who support him. Indeed, Allah is powerful and exalted in might. Surah Al-Hajj 24:30. From the very beginning, Salahuddin was unlike the warriors around him. Born in Tikrit in 1137, he was not raised among golden palaces or silken banners. His father, Najam ad-Din Ayyub, served as a soldier, and his uncle Shirkuh was a general. Yet the young boy, whose full name was Yusuf ibn Ayyub, did not grow up with the thirst of blood or the lust of battle. Instead, he was drawn to books, to the Quran, to the teachings of justice and humility. Those who watched him as a child would never have guessed that this gentle youth would one day lead armies that would shake the earth. But history has a way of choosing its champions. As Salahuddin grew, the Muslim world was caught in a storm. The Crusaders had turned Jerusalem into a fortress, transforming masjids into stables and sanctuaries into prisons. The humiliation cut deep into the soul of the Ummah. At the same time, Muslim rulers bickered, betraying one another for small pieces of land. It was during this chaos that Salahuddin's uncle Shirkuh took him under his wing, introducing him to the world of strategy and command. At first, Salahuddin had no taste for battle. His heart leaned toward learning and reflection. Yet the call of duty was louder than personal preference. Serving under Nur ad-Din Zengi, the ruler of Syria and a man of deep piety, Salahuddin began to understand that leadership was not about titles or thrones. It was about responsibility before God. Nur ad-Din was determined to unite the Muslim lands against the Crusaders, and in Salahuddin he saw a young soul who carried both humility and courage. The turning point came in Egypt. The Fatimid Caliphate was crumbling, its leaders weak and divided, and the Crusaders saw an opportunity to seize the land. Nur ad-Din sent Shirkuh and Salahuddin to defend Egypt. Battle after battle tested him, and though still young, Salahuddin's brilliance began to shine. When Shirkuh died, the weight of command unexpectedly fell on Salahuddin's shoulders. Reluctant at first, he accepted, and Egypt would never be the same. In Cairo, Salahuddin displayed not only military genius, but also justice. He ended the declining Fatimid Caliphate and restored allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph, reuniting the Muslims under a single banner. He cut down corruption, established order, and ensured that the poor were protected. Where others saw Egypt as a throne to be exploited, he saw it as an amanah, a trust from God. But while he was strengthening Egypt, Salahuddin's heart remained restless. One question consumed him: how could the Ummah rest while Jerusalem, the first Qibla, remained in chains? To him, victory was not about glory or gold. It was about freeing the land where the messenger of God had ascended to the heavens, the land of prophets and martyrs. Salahuddin began preparing, not just with armies, but with hearts. He knew that no single man, no matter how strong, could liberate Jerusalem alone. The Muslims had to be united. So he set out to bring together Syria and Egypt, healing divisions, reconciling rivals, and slowly building a wall of strength around the Crusader states. His rise was not marked by arrogance, but by humility. Unlike kings who bathed in riches, Salahuddin lived simply. He ate the food of his soldiers, wore plain clothes, and spent his wealth on the poor. His nights were spent in prayer, his days in service. He was not just building an army, he was shaping a a vision of an Ummah restored to honor. By the time the sun of the year 1180 rose, Salahuddin had become more than a general. He was a symbol. Muslims looked to him not as a ruler of Egypt or Syria, but as the leader who carried their hopes for Jerusalem. The Crusaders sensed it too. They saw in him a danger greater than any before, for his strength was not just in swords and shields, but in faith and unity. And so, the stage of history was set. The Crusader lords tightened their grip on Jerusalem, preparing for the inevitable clash. The people of Damascus whispered his name in prayer. The people of Cairo rallied under his banner. From caravan merchants to scholars in their schools, a single thought was shared across the Ummah. Perhaps this man, this Salahuddin, was the one chosen to restore Jerusalem. But destiny does not unfold without trials. To liberate the holy city, Salahuddin would have to face enemies far stronger than himself, armies better equipped, and rulers determined to destroy him. Yet his faith was unshaken. He once told his men, "We are not fighting for power nor for wealth, but to raise the word of God high." Thus began the march of Salahuddin, not as a conqueror chasing glory, but as a servant carrying the burden of a nation's hope. The deserts would soon tremble with the clash of steel. The Crusader kings would soon hear the roar of an army united under faith. And Jerusalem, silent under foreign rule, would soon witness the footsteps of its long-awaited liberator. The year was 1187. The world stood on the edge of a storm. In the east, the Muslims had found a leader who united their fractured lands. In the west, the Crusaders, who had once entered Jerusalem with rivers of blood, grew arrogant under their banners of the cross. They did not know that the sands of destiny were shifting. The clash between faith and steel was approaching, and at its center stood Salahuddin Ayyubi. One victory comes from Allah and conquest, and you see the people entering into the religion of Allah in multitudes. Then exalt him with praise of your Lord and ask forgiveness of him. Surah and Nasr 101:3. The Crusader states had ruled Jerusalem for nearly 90 years. They had built fortresses, stockpiled weapons, and enslaved the holy city. But their arrogance led to cruelty and tyranny. One man in particular, Reynald of Châtillon, was infamous. He broke truces, attacked innocent caravans, and even threatened to invade Makkah and Medina, mocking the very heart of the Muslim world. To Salahuddin, Reynald was not just an enemy. He was the embodiment of dishonor. The spark came when Reynald once again betrayed his word and attacked a Muslim caravan of pilgrims and merchants. This time, Salahuddin would not forgive. With patience that had lasted years, he prepared his forces for the greatest confrontation of his life. The armies of Islam gathered like waves upon the desert. From Egypt and Syria, from Aleppo and Mosul, men rallied to Salahuddin's banner. They were not merely soldiers, they were men who believed they were marching for a sacred trust. The liberation of Al-Quds. Salahuddin moved with both precision and faith, knowing that his enemy was strong but his cause was greater. In July of 1187, the Crusader kings marched their forces out of Jerusalem, seeking to crush Salahuddin once and for all. At their head rode King Guy of Lusignan, alongside the Templars and Hospitallers, proud and fearless. But arrogance blinds even the strongest armies. Salahuddin lured them into the arid plains near the village of Hattin, where the summer sun burned mercilessly and water was scarce. For 2 days, the Crusaders suffered. Their throats dried, their spirits broke, while Salahuddin's army controlled the wells and streams. The desert itself became his ally. And then, when the time was right, Salahuddin unleashed the storm. The clash at Hattin was thunder on the sands. Arrows rained like shadows, cavalry struck with lightning speed, and the Crusaders found themselves encircled. Their banners fell, their knights scattered. By the end of that fateful day, the Crusader army lay shattered, their pride reduced to dust. King Guy himself was captured, along with the feared Reynald. But here history took a turn that revealed the true heart of Salahuddin. Brought before him in chains, Reynald, the man who had broken every oath, who had spilled innocent blood, stood trembling. Salahuddin confronted him. "How many times have you broken your word?" Reynald sneered defiantly. Salahuddin, true to his honor, gave King Guy water, a symbol of mercy. But he refused to extend that mercy to Reynald. With his own hand, he struck him down, ending the life of the man who had defiled the sanctity of the Holy Lands. The message was clear: Salahuddin was merciful, but not to those who mocked the faith and slaughtered the innocent. With the Crusader army destroyed, the path to Jerusalem lay open. Salahuddin marched with dignity, not with rage. Unlike the Crusaders who had entered Jerusalem in 1099, slaughtering tens of thousands, Salahuddin came as a liberator. His soldiers could have stormed the city with fire and blood, but Salahuddin ordered restraint. On October 2, 1187, the gates of Jerusalem opened. The defenders, realizing resistance was futile, surrendered. What followed shocked even the Crusaders themselves. Instead of rivers of blood, Salahuddin offered terms of peace. Christians who could pay a ransom were free to leave. Those who could not were released anyway through his generosity. Churches were protected, the Eastern Christians allowed to remain, and no one was forced to convert. For the first time in nearly a century, the call to prayer rose again from Al-Aqsa Mosque. The sight was unforgettable. Salahuddin, barefoot, entered the mosque with tears in his eyes, bowing his head in gratitude. The masjid that had been defiled as a stable was purified once more. And the believers wept as the voice of the muezzin echoed through Jerusalem's sky. To the Christians of the West, news of Jerusalem's fall was like a thunderclap. Shock and fury spread through Europe, and kings vowed to raise new crusades. But to the Muslims, the liberation was more than a victory of swords. It was the restoration of honor. After decades of humiliation, the Ummah had risen again. And at its center stood a man who had conquered not just cities, but the hearts of his people through justice and faith. Yet, even in triumph, Salahuddin remained humble. He did not drape himself in gold or sit upon a throne of jewels. He prayed in the same plain garments, ate from the same simple dishes as his men, and reminded them, "We did not win by our strength, but by the will of God." The liberation of Jerusalem marked the peak of Salahuddin's life, but also the beginning of new challenges. For the kings of Europe were preparing to march once more. Richard the Lionheart was already sharpening his sword, and the Third Crusade was about to descend upon the Holy Land. But Salahuddin's legacy had already been sealed. He had achieved what generations before him had failed to do. He had restored Jerusalem, not through vengeance but through justice, not through arrogance but through humility. The desert winds carried his name. His enemies feared him, but even they could not help but respect him. The Crusaders called him a lion, yet one bound by honor. His people called him a hero, yet he insisted he was only a servant. And so, while Jerusalem rejoiced in its freedom, the story of Salahuddin was not yet finished. His greatest test was still to come, not with the sword, but with the weight of legacy. The world had changed. Jerusalem was free, the call to prayer once again rising from Al-Aqsa after nearly a century of silence. Yet victory is never the end of the story. Across the seas in Europe, kings, popes, and lords trembled at the news that the holy city had fallen. Shock turned into fury. Vows were made, armies were raised, and a storm was gathering, the Third Crusade. And once again, the destiny of nations would rest on the shoulders of Salahuddin Ayyubi. Do not lose heart or fall into despair. You will have the upper hand if you are true believers. Surah Al-E. In Reynald 139a, from France came King Philip T. From the Holy Roman Empire came Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, and from England came Richard I, remembered as Richard the Lionheart. These were not ordinary rulers. They were some of the most powerful monarchs of their age. Their armies were vast, their knights feared, and their ambition singular to reclaim Jerusalem. When the Crusader fleets landed on the shores of the Levant, the land once again shook with war. Cities along the coast became battlefields. Acre, Jaffa, Arsuf, each echoing with the thunder of swords and the cries of men. Salahuddin, though victorious at Hattin and Jerusalem, now faced enemies whose determination matched his own. The battles with Richard the Lionheart became legendary. Richard was bold, skilled in war, and unafraid to meet Salahuddin's armies head-on. Yet what struck the world was not just their rivalry, but their respect. Stories spread of how Salahuddin, upon hearing Richard had fallen ill, sent him fruits, ice, and his own physician. When Richard's horse was killed in battle, Salahuddin sent him 2 more, refusing to let his opponent fight dishonorably. To his soldiers, Salahuddin reminded, "Our aim is not humiliation but justice." Despite the ferocity of these campaigns, Jerusalem itself never fell back into Crusader hands. Salahuddin's strategy was brilliant. He defended the holy city while exhausting the Crusaders along the coasts. In 1192, after years of war, Salahuddin and Richard signed a treaty. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but Christian pilgrims would be allowed safe passage. The war ended not in massacre, but in mutual respect. Even Richard admitted, "Of all men, none is the equal of Salahuddin in honor." But the story of Salahuddin does not end on the battlefield. His true legacy was in the way he lived and ruled. Unlike kings who hoarded treasures, Salahuddin gave freely. He fed the poor, clothed the orphan, and supported scholars. He built schools, hospitals, and places of learning. His generosity was so vast that even his enemies marveled at it. Though he commanded an empire stretching from Egypt to Syria, his personal possessions were meager. He wore simple garments, ate the same food as his soldiers, and often prayed alone at night, seeking strength not from wealth or men, but from God. The most powerful proof of his humility came at his death. In March 1193 in Damascus, Salahuddin fell ill. The man who had shaken the thrones of kings and restored Jerusalem lay weak upon his bed. As he prepared to meet his Lord, he asked his followers to remember, "The world is temporary. What remains are the deeds we take to the next life." When he passed away, the world mourned. Yet the scene was unlike that of kings and emperors. He left behind no vast fortune, no overflowing treasury. In fact, his wealth was so little that his soldiers had to borrow money to pay for his burial shroud. The man who ruled empires departed with nothing but his faith and his deeds. His funeral was attended by people from every walk of life: scholars, soldiers, merchants, and the poor. Muslims wept for their hero, and even Christians in the region grieved the passing of a man they had come to respect deeply. In his death, as in his life, Salahuddin reminded the world that greatness is not measured by riches or thrones, but by honor, justice, and humility. The legacy of Salahuddin Ayyubi stretches far beyond the 12th century. To the Muslim world, he remains a symbol of unity in times of division, of mercy in times of war, and of faith in times of despair. To the wider world, even among his enemies, he became a symbol of chivalry, admired for his balance of strength and compassion. Unlike rulers who sought only conquest, Salahuddin sought something greater: the pleasure of God. Generations later, poets, historians, and storytellers would invoke his name. In the courts of kings, his example was remembered as a model of justice. In the hearts of believers, his story was retold as proof that faith can conquer fear, and humility can outshine arrogance. His name traveled across continents, from Cairo to Damascus, from Baghdad to London, spoken with both reverence and awe. And so, the boy once raised quietly in Tikrit, who loved books more than battle, became the liberator of Jerusalem and one of the most honored figures in history. His sword freed a city, but his heart freed a people from despair. Even today, centuries later, when the story of Jerusalem is told, the name Salahuddin is never far behind, not as a conqueror hungry for power, but as a servant who fulfilled his trust. Salahuddin Ayyubi's life closes with a lesson written not on stone, but in the soul of humanity. Power fades, wealth disappears, kingdoms crumble, but honor, justice, and faith endure forever.